All right, back a week later with our little study on Screwtape letters here, and we went over a little bit about who C.S. Lewis was and why he was doing these letters. Remember, I told you this. He shared this was the hardest book he ever had to write, or that he wrote, because he said it was actually painful, spiritually painful, to put his mind and his heart in the place of a demon and talk like a demon. But as we read these letters, really what this is kind of in a way, a very focused spiritual biography of C.S. Lewis. This is, the experience that he had, or the experiences that he had in his conversion, that he's put down in here and used that for the material. When later on in the interview, they asked him how he was able to do this, and was he divinely inspired to make this happen. He basically said, no, this is from the wretch of my heart. This is me. This is the wretched me that's doing this, not I don't have a divine thing with God. I have a human thing. So he's very outspoken about how this goes. So there's a couple of people in here that come and go that match his life, and we'll talk just a little bit about that as we go through. But remember how we're going to do this. So I know this is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 5 pages. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's only 4 pages. So, but there's still a lot of information in here. So last week we said if you want to punch it up, I think Alan, you put through a link to the online book. If you want to jump on that and follow along with the written book so that you can come back to it. If you have a written book, I highly recommend writing in your book and penning all over the place, because why not? It's your book, and we'll go from there. So if not, and you have a piece of paper and you want to just jot down keywords that in places where you hear something, if you put the keyword down, then when we get to coming back to it, we'll be able to find it through your keyword. All right, so we're going to begin by listening to John Glees as he reads an incredibly good reading of the Screwtape letters. I've told you, I think it's the best reading of all the ones that I have heard. So let's see. Tell me what you see. Screwtape letters?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Letter 2. My dear Wormwood, I note with grave displeasure that your patient has become a Christian. Do not indulge the hope that you will escape the usual penalties. Indeed, in your better moments, I trust you would hardly even wish to do so. In the meantime, we must make the best of the situation. There is no need to despair. Hundreds of these adult converts have been reclaimed after a brief sojourn in the enemy's camp and are now with us. All the habits of the patient, both mental and bodily, are still in our favor. One of our great allies at present is the Church itself. Do not misunderstand me. I do not mean the Church as we see her spread out through all time and space and rooted in eternity, terrible as an army with banners. That, I confess, is a spectacle which makes our boldest tempters uneasy. But fortunately, it is quite invisible to these humans. All your patient sees is the half-finished sham Gothic erection on the new building estate. When he goes inside, he sees the local grocer, with rather an oily expression on his face, bustling up to offer him one shiny little book containing a liturgy which neither of them understands, and one shabby little book containing corrupt texts of a number of religious lyrics, mostly bad and in very small print. When he gets to his pew and looks around him, he sees just that selection of his neighbors whom he has hitherto avoided. You want to lean pretty heavily on those neighbors. Make his mind flit to and fro between an expression like the body of Christ and the actual faces in the next pew. It matters very little, of course, what kind of people that next pew really contains. You may know one of them to be a great warrior on the enemy's side. No matter. your patient, thanks to our Father below, is a fool, provided that any of those neighbours sing out of tune, or have boots that squeak, or double chins, or odd clothes. The patient will quite easily believe that their religion must therefore be somehow ridiculous. At his present stage, you see, he has an idea of Christians in his mind, which he supposes to be spiritual, but which, in fact, is largely pictorial. His mind is full of togas and sandals and armours and bare legs, and the mere fact that the other people in church wear modern clothes is a real, though of course an unconscious, difficulty to him. Never let it come to the surface. Never let him ask what he expected them to look like. Keep everything hazy in his mind now, and you will have all eternity wherein to amuse yourself by producing in him the peculiar kind of clarity which hell affords. Work hard, then, on the disappointment or anticlimax which is certainly coming to the patient during his first few weeks as a churchman. The enemy allows this disappointment to occur on the threshold of every human endeavour. It occurs when the boy who has been enchanted in the nursery by stories from the Odyssey buckles down to really learning Greek. It occurs when lovers have got married and begin the real task of learning to live together. In every department of life, it marks the transition from dreaming aspiration to laborious doing. The enemy takes this risk because he has a curious fantasy of making all these disgusting little human vermin into what he calls his free lovers and servants. Sons is the word he uses, with his inveterate love of degrading the whole spiritual world by unnatural liaisons with the two-legged animals. Desiring their freedom, he therefore refuses to carry them, by their mere affections and habits, to any of the goals which he sets before them. He leaves them to do it on their own. And there lies our opportunity. But also, remember, there lies our danger. If once they get through this initial dryness successfully, they become much less dependent on emotion and therefore much harder to tempt. I have been writing hitherto on the assumption that the people in the next pew afford no rational ground for disappointment. Of course, if they do, if the patient knows that the woman with the absurd hat is a fanatical bridge player, or the man with squeaky boots a miser and an extortioner, then your task is so much the easier. All you then have to do is to keep out of his mind the question, if I, being what I am, can consider that I am in some sense a Christian, why should the different vices of those people in the next pew prove that their religion is mere hypocrisy and convention? You may ask whether it is possible to keep such an obvious thought from occurring even to a human mind. It is, Wormwood, it is. Handle him properly, and it simply won't come into his head. He has not been anything like long enough with the enemy to have any real humility yet. What he says, even on his knees, about his own sinfulness is all parrot talk. At bottom, he still believes he has run up a very favourable credit balance in the enemy's ledger by allowing himself to be converted, and thinks that he is showing great humility and condescension in going to church with these smug, commonplace neighbours at all. Keep him in that state of mind as long as you can. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Okay. See, so quick, but so packed. All right, so just since you've heard it really quickly, is there anything that stood out to you that you want to catch on? Something that that caught your ear before we roll into it? Any one particular thing? If not, then we'll just go from the front. There, there's.
Can I say just one thing? I'm sorry, Father Billy.
Yeah.
I had to mull on it for a second, but the fact that he was talking about the person coming into church trying to convert themselves being, amongst people that he felt like he was above, or she, or whoever. I just found that so typical of today. I mean, I just don't even know. It just struck me. It was toward the end of the passage that he read. He said, well, while what he says, even on his knees, about his own sinfulness is all parrot talk, at bottom he still believes he has run up a very favorable credit balance in the enemy's ledger, and enemy being God, by allowing himself to be converted, and thinks he has shown great humility and condescension to going to church with these smug, commonplace neighbors at all.
Right.
I mean, I just kind of like, that gave me a little bit of heartburn.
Well, you'll see that this whole letter is about false vision or false view. It's about how he is now. I don't know if you know people who have converted, and when they convert, they are very excited and usually, kind of spiritually emotional about it, and all in and very excited and fiery about what they're doing. And that propels them, and can propel them for weeks, maybe even a couple of months if they're lucky, until they get worn down. And that's what Screwtape is saying, that his idea is as much, his idea of what his conversion is like is as much theater as it is actual event. He's been converted, so what? He doesn't know what to do with that, but he knows what he thinks he should do with it based on his life. So at the time that C.S. Lewis wrote this, there's this thing where he says, at the present stage, you see, he has an idea of Christians in his mind, which he supposes to be spiritual, but which in fact is largely pictorial. His mind is full of togas and sandals and armor and bare legs, and the mere fact that other people in church wear modern clothes is a real but unconscious problem for him. So Lewis lived in a time, this was written in a time when the imagery, the books that went around, what was written that was going around, was all togas and this type of thing, the biblical stories. And I think we've all seen these, the old Cecil B. DeMille movies like Ben-Hur and The Greatest Story Ever Told, literally casts of thousands, unbelievable sets that will never happen again. They were called sandal movies. The nickname were sandals movies. So that was the books. The books of Lewis's time moved forward into the theater. So today this would be different, wouldn't it? People don't think of sandals and togas and bare legs and things like that. What do you think this would translate into today for us? What do you think that the convert to Christianity coming to church would be expecting when they got there? What do you think they'd be looking for? Or, unconsciously, like they wouldn't know necessarily that they were looking for this, but they would become aware, maybe even after they left and went home.
Probably a community of like-minded people.
Yes, absolutely. And
maybe some other converts, perhaps. Maybe they don't know, but.
And that touches on a larger ethic. It goes to the whole place of this whole letter, where he's saying, I think today people come and they say, Christians are supposed to be, they never get mad, and they have patience that never wears out, and they're kind of holy, and when you get near them, you just feel like they're holy, and they say holy things, and it's all that holy, and it's going to be wonderful. And then people come to church and they start overhearing people talk about their backache and their car broke down, and maybe even somebody says, I went to the auto shop and the guy was a jerk, and I'm not going back there again, and don't go. And this is creating what he's saying here, this unconscious, perhaps at first, dichotomy of the image or the thought that all Christians are supposed to be these holy, loving, patient, divine kind of people, and then suddenly they sound just like he sounds or she sounds. They're just normal people, and it's a problem. It's a problem as it gets forward for the converts, and this is why a lot of times converts come and then the converts go. We'll see that in the next letter. It has to do this, the very beginning of this. Remember that thing about the habits? I've talked a lot about habits in sermons. It's really, really hard to break habits. So if we have a habit that is counter to our spiritual progress or to our church life, and we've been doing that thing as a habit, just as a part of our life for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, then you go to church, it's really hard to break that habit, that pattern of life, and give it all over and just convert into the church method or the church rhythm. So Screwtape is saying that's all on you, on the human. And since it's so hard for them, it's so easy for us. You know, I remember we had a parishioner years and years ago who worked nights earlier in their life, and because of that, they were always late to church, sometimes 10 minutes before the service ended, because when they worked nights, they went to sleep at like, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning, and they didn't get up till noon. Well, they had not worked nights for a while, but they were still staying up till 4 or 5 in the morning, and it was really hard to get up at 9:30 and go to church. They couldn't do it. So that was obviously, you know, Wormwood having a field day in their life by giving them energy to continue to power the habit and make it very hard to break. And eventually they left. They left because they couldn't create friendships. They couldn't create community. They didn't know what was going on. They weren't growing because they just weren't there. And whenever, after the service, how do you think they spent the 15 minutes talking? They spent it by saying the "I'm sorry I'm late" story over and over and over and over again, and not really making any connections that were deeper than their guilt over being late to church. So habit is a big thing. We all have to worry about that. We all fight the habits. Let's see. Fortunately, it's quite invisible. Okay, I love this line. It's probably one of the most beautiful descriptions of heaven, isn't it? The church, as we see her spread out through all time and space and rooted in eternity, terrible as an army with banners. Like, you know, this is obviously Screwtape's terrible as an army with banners, and he says that I confess is a spectacle which makes our boldest tempters uneasy. So this is we just did the book of Revelation in the Bible study on Thursday, and whenever I hear this, I think of the book of Revelation, and the book of Revelation really portrays much more the picture of heaven as this, you know, God's glory. It's the glory of God. God doesn't make heaven as a military machine. God makes heaven as God's place of glory, and the people that are there are partaking in God's glory. So Screwtape's really just talking about God's glory, and what he's saying is right. The converts, and this is even us, we have a hard time in our faith doing what we're doing in church or in our prayer life, and at the same time feeling connected to this, you know, spread out through all eternity, rooted in eternity, terrible as an army of banners, to be connected to that glory as a real concrete part of our life. That's hard. That's a hard jump. But that's the jump that Christ calls us to as we move forward in our spiritual life. At this stage, when this person is brand new, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible. What people will do is they will manufacture the image, and then they will get exhausted. And when they get exhausted trying to manufacture the image, they will get disenchanted, and then they'll make excuses for themselves, and then they drift away. And that's what Screwtape is moving toward. It's just a largely a kind of natural progression or regression based on our sin nature and just being human. So remember what we said before, Satan doesn't have to work too hard to remake us. The only thing Satan has to do is emphasize the fallen nature of us over the call to be people, children of God. Just keep us over in that minus column, and we'll never go anywhere over there. We'll stay right where we are.
I think you also people coming to church would expect kind of cookie cutter personalities, everybody to be like super nice and
Yeah.
glowing, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, like this idealized view of what a good Christian person might be, and when you get there, everybody's just normal, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you go, oh yeah, well that makes total sense if you think about it. I mean, you know.
That's the disappointment, the anticlimax he's talking about.
Yeah,
Real
but you can, I mean, it's been a long time since I first went to church, so I'm just trying to think about that, what it would have been, what I would have thought.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't been so long since I came back, and I can tell you that I love this parish. You guys are real people. You love God. I've learned so much from you, and thank you for that. But I can tell you, growing up as a Catholic when I was younger, that was kind of like a, I don't know, disciplinary coming up into the Christian faith. And I didn't find it so friendly and welcoming.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was getting married for the first time, we were trying to do that through the Catholic Church, and it really wasn't that pleasant of an experience.
Oh.
So I kind of turned away from the faith and tried to come back, and I did for a little while when my kids were young, and then departed again, came back, departed again, came back, and now I'm here to stay. And I thank you guys for all that, because you showed me what it meant to be like real Christians. I mean, we're living every day just like everybody else on the earth, except that we have a different vision. We have a different focus. And it doesn't have to be that we have to ignore everything that's going on around us. It's just that we have to look at a different sight for the long term.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. That's really wonderful. There's a wonderful theological pronouncement that he makes that brings us through to what God's plan is constantly. It's on for me on my book. It's on page 7, and he said it's when he says the enemy allows the disappointment to occur on the threshold of every human endeavor. It occurs with a boy who's enchanted with the nursery with stories from Odyssey and then buckles down learning Greek. It occurs when lovers get married and begin the real task of learning to live together. In every department of life, it marks a transition from dreaming aspiration to laborious doing. The enemy takes this risk because he has a curious fantasy of making all these disgusting little human vermin into what he calls his free lovers and servants. Sons is the word he uses. So this is, if we're capable, and this is why new Christians need to be mentored. New Christians should have a Christian with them to help mentor them, because they're going to hit this place of disillusionment and disappointment. And if they have somebody with them to joyfully explain that this is actually that this is expected and this is allowed by God for their strengthening, for their growing. If you and I, this happened to me, right? When I joined the Marine Corps. Alan, maybe it happened to you when you joined the service, but I joined the Marine Corps with wonderful images and ideas. Some of them were based on movies, John Wayne and that kind of thing. Other ones were based on the Marines that I'd seen and talked to, and excellent uniforms. So I had all these ideas, and it was those things that took me in. And of course, my dad told me when I was young, I should join the service for at least a little while and give back to the country, because the country's given to me. So I did that out of responsibility. So that got me in there. But what I stayed in, when I got in and spent the time in, there was something much bigger, much richer, much more profound, much more meaningful. That was the actual reality of the service. And of course, you're mentored going through boot camp, going into the fleet. You're
mentored.
Yeah. So that's what keeps you. You need somebody along to help you see and understand that the profound reality versus the kind of cardboard cutout that you have brought with you into the service. That's why we have in the range, you have so many people, men and women that get busted out of boot camp. They don't make it. My platoon was 87 people when we started. It was 38 graduated.
Oh,
Yeah.
over half.
And they recycle. They kick people back to the platoon, and still the number goes down. And it's sadly, when I got out in the fleet, I realized that the reason why is because in the boot camp stage, there's no mentor. In the boot camp stage, you're really just being focused. You're being conditioned to reach that point where you really can be mentored and have the rest of it come to you. And if the person is not capable of seeing, we began to see the bigger, it's kind of like an hourglass. You're coming down to here and you begin to see that it's going to go out. You're going to get to this other place. The guys that failed, they were going down and they couldn't see that. And they left, they walked away. I think it's the same thing that Lewis is talking about here. If you can't see, if you haven't got a mentor, people leave. They can't do it.
Can't do that big picture.
That big picture. Yeah. But there's more to it. More to it. Very sad. I've talked to so many people who have gone through that and go through this in the church and have left exactly because of this. 100% because of this. Lewis hit it right on the head. So you can imagine when he got converted, he was going through the same thing. I think it's universal.
Well, conditioned in the 60s, growing up when I did, if you were considered Christian, you were perfect. Nobody was perfect. So if you didn't, you felt like you were a sinner and you did something wrong, you felt like you could never be a Christian.
And you couldn't tell anybody.
And, I mean, it was damning evidence to me that, yeah, I'm just going to go to hell. Why should I even bother? And as I've grown up and learned and continue learning, that is not the case at all. God knows we're flawed.
Right.
And that's what people, I think, need to hear, is that he knows we're flawed and he loves us nonetheless and wants to take us in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're already in. We're already in. It's that we have to get to a place where we will accept it. We will
exactly
accept being in.
Exactly. And that's what I learned just recently in the last couple of years. And I think that's what a lot of people need to hear and grasp on their own, right, instead of thinking that, going to church and being a Christian means you have to be perfect. It doesn't mean that at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I guess I feel very fortunate to have grown up in the Episcopal church where I guess I never worried about hell. It wasn't really a big message about you're going to go to hell. But I do hear that from, I guess, Catholic friends and Baptist friends that's really how they were raised.
Yep.
So I feel fortunate that I got a different message.
My mother, when she went to church, she went to the Roman Catholic Church. My whole family's Roman Catholic. She went to the Roman Catholic Church with her mom, and then in the afternoon she would go down and do little jobs for the people down the road. And she went down. She was 19. She went down the road and went with my dad to his church. It was at that time there were no Anglican churches there, so he was attending a Lutheran church. And she said that when she'd been told so many times that if she sets foot in another church, she was going to be struck by lightning and dead and go straight to hell. So she said she spent she never opened her eyes, the entire service. And when she came back out, Dad had a Model T, and she got in the back seat and curled up on the floorboards with her head down because she thought that she would be struck by lightning and die. And it really, you can imagine not only going through that, but how confusing it must have been for her afterward when she didn't get struck by lightning and die, because it completely undid what she'd been taught for years and years and years and years.
And if that's not going to happen, what else is untrue?
Exactly. So you can see how the
Right.
church sets itself up to fail with stuff like that.
Yeah, my grandparents were staunch Baptists, and we used to go to their house frequently for family visits. And I remember we had a little deck of playing cards, me and my siblings, and we brought them over there, and my grandfather flipped his wig.
Gambling.
Oh my gosh. He said we were sinners. He threw us out of the house. He said we were sinning because we had playing cards. And
What on earth?
yeah, my dad just had flipped his wig, but he was against his dad, and it was just a total nightmare. I mean, as a kid, that's the whole thing I had to deal with all the time, and everything was a sin at my grandparents' house. And we were sinners because my mom was Catholic and my dad really didn't practice religion, but my mom baptized us all Catholic, so that made us like,
You're definitely going to hell.
really, really bad people in her eyes and my grandfather's eyes. Yeah, it was a nightmare for me with religion when I was growing up. It was like my mom was such a staunch Catholic. My dad was like, because he grew up with Baptist parents who thought, if he didn't come in the house the right way, it was a sin and all this stuff. So he kind of rebelled against that, and it was just a nightmare for me.
Screwtape was all over that.
Yeah, I came to my own on that one. It took me a long time, but now I realize, God is really on my side. He's not against me, just because I was brought up one way, and
we have
it was crazy.
We have the second letter pretty much down. You want to roll through the third?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. Let me see if I can make sure I've got it and queue it up here. Oh, here we go. 1, 2, there we are.
Letter.
Aha, almost. There we go. All right. You see it?
Letter 3. My dear Wormwood, I am very pleased by what you tell me about this man's relations with his mother. But you must press your advantage. The enemy will be working from the center outwards, gradually bringing more and more of the patient's conduct under the new standard, and may reach his behavior to the old lady at any moment. You want to get in first. Keep in close touch with our colleague Glubos, who is in charge of the mother, and build up between you in that house a good settled habit of mutual annoyance, daily pinpricks. The following methods are useful. 1. Keep his mind on the inner life. He thinks his conversion is something inside him, and his attention is therefore chiefly turned at present to the states of his own mind, or rather to that very expurgated version of them, which is all you should allow him to see. Encourage this. Keep his mind off the most elementary duties by directing it to the most advanced and spiritual ones. Aggravate that most useful human characteristic, the horror and neglect of the obvious. You must bring him to a condition in which he can practice self-examination for an hour without discovering any of those facts about himself which are perfectly clear to anyone who has ever lived in the same house with him or worked in the same office. 2. It is no doubt impossible to prevent his praying for his mother, but we have means of rendering the prayers innocuous. Make sure that they are always very spiritual, that he is always concerned with the state of her soul and never with her rheumatism. two advantages will follow. In the first place, his attention will be kept on what he regards as her sins, by which, with a little guidance from you, he can be induced to mean any of her actions which are inconvenient or irritating to himself. Thus, you can keep rubbing the wounds of the day a little sorer, even while he is on his knees. The operation is not at all difficult, and you will find it very entertaining. In the second place, since his ideas about her soul will be very crude and often erroneous, he will, in some degree, be praying for an imaginary person. And it will be your task to make that imaginary person daily less and less like the real mother, the sharp-tongued old lady at the breakfast table. In time, you may get the cleavage so wide that no thought or feeling from his prayers for the imagined mother will ever flow over into his treatment of the real one. I have had patients of my own so well in hand that they could be turned at a moment's notice from impassioned prayer for a wife's or son's soul to beating or insulting the real wife or son without a qualm. 3. When two humans have lived together for many years, it usually happens that each has tones of voice and expressions of face that are almost unendurably irritating to the other. Work on that. Bring fully into the consciousness of your patient that particular lift of his mother's eyebrows, which he learned to dislike in the nursery, and let him think how much he dislikes it. Let him assume that she knows how annoying it is and does it to annoy. If you know your job, he will not notice the immense improbability of the assumption. And of course, never let him suspect that he has tones and looks which similarly annoy her. As he cannot see or hear himself, this is easily managed. And 4, in civilized life, domestic hatred usually expresses itself by saying things which would appear quite harmless on paper. The words are not offensive, but in such a voice or at such a moment that they are not far short of a blow in the face. To keep this game up, you and Glubose must see to it that each of these two fools has a sort of double standard. Your patient must demand that all his own utterances are to be taken at their face value and judged simply on the actual words, while at the same time judging all his mother's utterances with the fullest and most oversensitive interpretation of the tone and the context and the suspected intention. She must be encouraged to do the same to him. Hence, from every quarrel, they can both go away convinced, or very nearly convinced, that they are quite innocent. You know the kind of thing. I simply ask her what time dinner will be, and she flies into a temper. Once this habit is well established, you have the delightful situation of a human saying things with the express purpose of offending, and yet having a grievance when offense is taken. Finally, tell me something about the old lady's religious position. Is she at all jealous of the new factor in her son's life, at all piqued that he should have learned from others, and so late, what she considers she gave him such a good opportunity of learning in childhood? Does she feel he is making a great deal of fuss about it, or that he's getting in on very easy terms? Remember the elder brother in the enemy's story. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Okay. See how fast they are. So he continues. I love that he's got an itinerary with this on 1 through 4. All right. Anything jump out at you?
Just comical. It's so. Today, I complain a lot about people just having no idea what impact they have on other people. Like they're just not paying any attention.
Right.
And that's exactly what he's saying. Like you have no worry about what you're doing or how you're acting or how you're going to be taken. Only worry about how the other person is being defensive or
how you feel about
annoying or how you feel about them, and assume that they're at their worst instead of them being innocent in this, the whole thing.
Yes. Yes. My one of my aunts used to, when she drank hot tea, she would go to suck the tea up with that air going there to make it cooler. But when I would tap my hand on the table, she would just go ballistic. Like she hated it. It was like it was the worst thing. And then she would go right back to going with her cup. And I remember when I was a kid, I couldn't figure out why she had such a visceral reaction to me while she was doing this thing that absolutely everybody hated. Everybody.
Did anybody tell her?
I think my mom did. It was her sister.
Yeah.
I would tell her about it, but Virginia never heard anything. You know, she didn't. She's like this. She never heard never heard anything about herself. Could not hear it.
Yeah.
This point in time that Lewis is alive, you hear him. He's a full-grown man. He's living at home with his mom. You know, today that's a big problem. We have a lot of problems with that. Hearing that 40-year-old guys have moved back home. That's not this. This was after World War II. After World War One, Lewis himself, he went to World War One with a friend of his, very dear friend, and the bomb that went off, the mortar that went off, they don't know exactly what it was that went off during an offensive that wounded him and got him shipped back home, killed his friend. And before they went into that battle, he and his friend made a pact that they would care for each other's family no matter what. And so when Lewis got back home, his friend, if he had gone home, would have moved in and taken care of his mother. That was the idea. He may be moving into his mother's house, but he's taking care. And because his friend wasn't there, Lewis moved into his friend's mother's house and took care of her his whole life. And when he became a don at Oxford and moved to Oxford, he moved her there, and she lived with him her entire life, and he took care of her that whole time. So this is not an anomaly here. This was going on a lot after the wars because the way things worked out. We have a new character, Glubos, introduced like that, working on the mother. Number one, so keep his mind on the inner life. This is where it all starts. You know, he's thinking about being holy and being the holy guy, and he's looking at all of his inner life. This is sometimes you come across the young and new converts that are like this, and if you're not careful, you feel kind of resentful of them a little bit because they're kind of emoting this kind of serene kind of holiness because they're all inside, they're all in here, and he's saying, yes, do that, keep that going. I like this line where he says, is there inside of him, and his attention is therefore chiefly turned at present to the state of his own mind, or rather a very expurgated version of them, and you should allow him to see. So that expurgated means sanitized. So he's looking at his own mind and he's cleaning it up and only seeing himself in the very best light. But then he is finding because now he's holy, he's finding the unholy faults in other people. If you've known anybody who's gotten a degree in psychology in college, and you've talked to them while they're going through, especially the third and fourth year, they can be extremely trying because they come home and you just can tell that they think that they know how to dissect you and understand you, and they're going to tell you how you need to correct your life to be a real person. So the intention of Screwtape to get to promote this in his patient, Wormwood's patient. The prayer thing is great. I love this. I've had this experience myself, or at least I've seen this experience. In time, you may get the cleavage so wide that no thought or feeling from his prayers for the imagined mother will ever flow over to the treatment of the real one. I've had a patient of my own so well in hand they could turn in a moment's notice from the impassioned prayer for wife or son's soul to beating or insulting the real wife or son without a qualm. I've seen that. There is it's like they're praying for this person and they are feeling compassionate and loving and caring and want to want to help this person, and then there's the person, and they're annoying and troublesome, and they just go after them. I've even had a man who, in the midst of prayers with him, where he was audibly praying for his wife, we were interrupted by his wife, who came in to say, I'm almost ready for dinner. And in a heartbeat, well, we're still praying, boom, he turned to her and let her have it at the door, because we were praying. And who was she and what was she doing? And I was floored. Holy smokes. And then when she left, he said, okay, it's okay. It's all right. Let's go pray. Let's pray. I'm like, what are we praying for? It's a fiction. You know, his prayers for his wife were just a fiction, but he could not see it. It was a bizarre thing.
Did you tell him? Try to?
Years later, I did. At that point, I was a lay pastoral assistant. I wasn't in a position to do that. I was also floored by it. I'd never seen anything like it. It was the first time I'd come across that.
Probably had no words right at that point.
It wasn't until I got
You're like,
yeah. Well, the most awkward thing was going and eating dinner. And
Oh, you were there with him?
yeah.
Ooh.
oh, that's not good.
She's right here, and he's continuing to nip at her, and she's nipping back, and all I could hear in my head was his prayers in the room. And I'm like, this is like schizophrenic. Nothing matches here. Went back to my priest, Dwayne, and told him the whole story, and he was like, yes, yeah. Like, okay, well, I'll be able to live with this one day. I talked to him when I got back from seminary after I'd been ordained. I went back to my ordination parish and spent a week and stayed with them, because I'd stayed with them before. And he was still doing it, not as much as he did before, and I talked to him. So I don't know what happened after that. But yeah.
Hope he listened.
I do too. I really do.
This one doesn't click with me. I don't see how that doesn't. I don't know. This doesn't. It doesn't feel part of my. At least I don't feel like I do that. I hope not, but this doesn't. I don't understand how people can do that, I guess. Yeah.
Well,
I've never prayed for somebody's soul. I don't really pray for people's souls. I pray for their human life, because that's what I can affect.
You might be able to translate this into prayers for somebody to help them. You know, help them be a better person, help them to get over their addiction, help them to, you know, be able to see what's going on, all of these things for them, and not realize that you actually have some of the same things in your own life, and you're not able to see those things. So you're not praying for that for yourself. And the bigger picture means that you're seeing that person as, in a way, as a broken person. We're all broken, but you're seeing that person as a broken person. That's who you're praying for. You're praying for them to be healed. But because you can't see it in yourself, you're not broken. You're not broken. You're
And
whole.
how would I ever know?
Yes, that's it. That's it. Well, Blue Boat is going to make sure
I am far from perfect, for sure.
Blue Boat
Yeah,
or
you're
Wormwood.
in the same camp as me, Catherine.
His-
Yeah.
Far from perfect.
His whole effort here is to keep you exactly in that place, not being able to see, and continue on with that process at, you know, infinitum. I like this thing.
I do pray for people I don't like very much, and that's hard.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
And I don't think I'm like them, and I hope not, because the things that I don't like about them, I really would hope I am not like that. So.
You're praying for people you don't like. You're doing more than many. So
Yeah.
now the number 3 we can all relate to really easy, right? I know I can. Two humans that live together for years usually happens they have tones of voice and expression of face that are almost unbearably irritating to the other. Isn't that the fact?
Yeah.
But you know, this may be where I don't see myself, and I have another. But Robert used to always say, "What are you looking at me like that for?" You know, or I'm like, I'm not looking at you in any way. I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, so this one definitely kind of hits home a little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
it's got really bad for me and my husband because we're now retired and we're here together most all the time. And sometimes I'll look at him and I'm like, are you really going to sit there all day? And
Yeah.
I'm sure he does the same thing to me. Are you really going to sit there all day?
His
So,
mother-in-law
yeah,
used to say it's too much togetherness.
yeah.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted, Cheryl.
I'm sorry about that.
That's
I was
all
just saying my husband and I stare at each other now that we're retired and going, why are you sitting there? What are you doing? You know, and it just, we're back and forth like that. And then, you know, he gets out and starts doing something like, why are you doing that? You know, I don't know. It's
He
just
can't please. He
weird.
can't please you.
No, and I can't please him, I don't think either. But regardless,
You got to work on just letting each other be.
well, that's what I've been doing, and I do my own thing. So I got to call you to go for the walks. Remember?
Yeah. Well, I'm working in person full time now, so
Okay.
I'm not home at all.
When you're ready, I do it every day. But
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I'm just thankful that I have him.
Yeah.
Because I know everything is temporary here on this earth. So I just remind myself when I get a little annoyed, we're only here for a short time. Be thankful he's here right now.
Yeah.
And just love him for who he is. That's what I keep reminding myself of.
You'll notice that, okay, so I don't know, we only have a couple minutes, but if you went back to to letter 1, and I won't bore you with all that because we already read that, but at the end, the very last sentence, which we read twice last time, was, do remember that you were there to fuddle him. From the way some young fiends talk, anyone would suppose that it's his job to teach. Okay, so that is the primary strength of Screwtape and Wormwood, is to keep the truth obscured and to accentuate and to bring out and make the false reality the important one. And if that means continuing to reinvent the false reality over and over, that's the thing. So what is it that's going to break all this apart for us, for the patient, if it could be done? It's the truth. So for us, I mean, what Jenny and I do when she has that look, or when I do, and she is that we were unable to do that for many years, but to do this. But what we do now is we stop and we say, I'll say, that's that look, and she'll say, what look? Well, you know, the one I said, and so we will talk about it so that we become aware, and we want to usually laughing about it. So we're pulling the fiction away, pulling the teeth of the offense away, and I can even give her clues or cues in our discussions where when something's happening in our talk, if it's a little edgy and she begins to look like that, I can tell her so that she will do something different. And she even asked me, what should I do different? And I say, well, say something. You know, and get energetically inject into the conversation, which she does. So the defense that Screwtape doesn't want anyone to know, that we all need to know, especially in relationship, is to be honest. To set up a place where we can talk about these things that annoy us with each other, the glance or the action or whatever, and laugh about it. But we're really sharing how we feel. And asking our loved one to share how they feel and do it in a very positive and affirming way, instead of getting angry and upset, or just the opposite of that is melancholy and absent. You know, I've been with too many men who do that cliche thing where they they say, you say, how are you and how's your wife? And like, oh, you know how she is. And then they talk about something different, and they've just characterized her and managed her into this little bucket, and kind of put her over there and said, yeah, you know how that is, you know how they are, you know how women are over there. That's horrible. And so completely avoidable if with just honesty and talking, humorous, lighthearted talking. So as you think about Screwtape for the next week, and how his desire for everyone is to be short-sighted, and one of the worst things that we've had in the 21st century is this phrase, conflict avoidant. We say we're conflict avoidant, but and that's fine. The problem is that we become so sensitive that we are conflict avoidant with everything. And that includes being able to talk to the people that we love, for fear that we're going to have a conversation that leads to a conflict. And what it really does is build a wall, because we're unable to talk. So take away Screwtape this week, and maybe look for that opening in your relationships, in your life, to share and be honest in a lighthearted way. Begin a conversation that can lead somewhere as you go. All right, we're on to letter 4 as we go for next week, and I believe there's a little thing that I've got that will come along with that for us for our time together.
Okay.
Look forward to that. Okay, so have a wonderful night. Thank you, everybody. Be well, sleep well. We'll see you again.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Good week.
Bye.